Welcome to episode 159 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today's guest is Angela Burk. She's the author of Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. It is a raw, honest, and often funny look at what really happens when women hit midlife and realize they have been editing themselves for decades. Angela spent 30 years in high-tech marketing before retiring, and in her 50s she made a bold decision. She picked up a book idea she first sketched out at age 35 and finally brought it into the world. What she discovered along the way is something many women quietly feel but rarely say out loud. Here are a few takeaways from our conversation. First, midlife is not a crisis. Angela reframes it as clarity. It is a time when women begin reclaiming parts of themselves that they have been shrinking or silencing for years. Second, many women have been conditioned to believe their happiness comes last. Angela challenges that belief and explains why saying no does not require an essay. Sometimes just saying, "I'm not available," is enough. Third, rest is not laziness. It is nourishment. Angela explains why claiming rest, asking for help, and slowing down are essential parts of thriving after 50. Fourth, reinvention does not mean blowing up your life. It can start with releasing one belief that no longer serves you and reclaiming one part of yourself that has been waiting patiently. And finally, you do not need permission to take up space in your own life. One of Angela's favorite questions when doubt creeps in is to simply ask, why the hell not? If you are a woman navigating midlife or someone you love is going through that stage, this conversation offers reassurance, perspective, and a lot of truth you may not have heard before. To learn more about her story and mission after turning 50, please welcome Angela Burk to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Angela. I appreciate it. What caused you to write this wonderful book about midlife and how women encounter it?
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. And in truth, I wrote the book when I was 35. I started this idea. I had this idea because I was going through pretty big transitions at 35. I was a new mom. I had been married. I was at a sort of turning point with my career, trying to figure out which path I wanted to go down. And so I was struggling with these questions. And also at that time, my hormones were starting to shift and nobody was talking about it. So I sketched out this book. And I had chapter outlines and key questions. I loosely knew the structure that I wanted. And I literally put it all into a red folder that got buried. And as happens with life, it takes over. And I retired last December. And in cleaning out my desk, I found the folder, to be totally honest with you. And so I opened the folder and I was reading through it. And I thought so many of the questions that I had and the topics that I was struggling with then are the same ones I had now. And again, I looked around my circle and nobody was talking. So I gave myself from December until April to marinate on the idea of, hey, I'm in my mid-50s. Can I really do this? And so April came and I decided, yes, I could. And really, I was struggling with a lot of the same questions and I wanted answers and I wanted expert advice. And as I looked around, I realized my friends weren't talking, and even my own mother, who is 19 years older than me, wasn't talking. It's just not something that was shared. And so in addition to those things, I also realized there's a lot more being discussed on social media, which is great, but the amount of information coming at us is so vast.
Yes.
And so I thought, you know what? I think I can do this now. And that's what I set out to do in April.
Okay, very good. What was your career before you decided to retire?
Yep. So I spent 30 years in high-tech marketing, so B2B marketing. And when I started this book process and as I worked through it, turns out that 30 years in high-tech marketing is not transferable to publishing.
Then nothing really is.
No, it really isn't. So that's been a little bit of an awakening. But yeah, I spent 30 years in marketing.
Okay, very good. You have you said you were in mid-50s right now? But you're unique because you have a teenager at home yet.
I do. So I have 3 children myself. They're 23, 20, and 15 is my youngest. And with my fiance who lives in Australia, so we do a long distance thing, he has 4 children. So combined, we have a staggering 7. And both of us have our youngest who are 15. His is a girl and mine is a boy. But yes, I have a 15-year-old here at home.
Oh, that's incredible. It keeps you young, that's for sure.
Yes, it keeps me young. Also, my older boys like to point out that I'm a very different mom to their younger brother than I was with them. And partially because I think I'm tired. I'm exhausted. And I think the other part too is that for a lot of our time, it's just him and I together. So it'll be 9:00 at night and he'll look at me and go, "Hey mom, would it be okay if we went to go get yogurt?" And I look around, I'm like, "I'm not doing anything. Yeah, let's go do it." And my older boys are like, "You would never do that with us."
I've heard that so many times that the third child is just, they get away with anything.
They do, yeah. And I do say he's really easy, but also I'm very tired. So it's hard for me I pick my battles very selectively, I'll say.
I'm glad you're writing a book on midlife because you're right. A lot of people have been telling me that nobody is talking about it, especially from a woman's perspective, as to what to expect when menopause hits and all this other kind of stuff. And I know personally, I was crushed by the empty nest for years leading to our youngest daughter moving out. We would count down the days. Every Christmas newsletter had the number of days until she graduated and we'd be free of the parenting responsibilities. And so when that day happened and she left, the silence was deafening. And it really impacted me because I lost a great deal of purpose in my life, shuttling the girls around to their various activities and school projects and functions, etc.
Yeah, it is a hard one. And I think for me and for a lot of women, as I mentioned before, so many of us feel at a crossroads in so many parts of our life, whether it's kids, parenting, or even women who've not had children. You still get to these points where you're at a crossroads. Relationships, career, identity, appearance, hormones. And there's just not a lot of talking that happens. And I think some of these transitions, certainly not the least of which is learning to parent adult kids, and that often turns into, hey, we're empty nesters now. I noticed that for me and for many of the women that I talked to for the book, as well as the experts that I interviewed, we begin to look at our lives as if they don't belong to us. I don't recognize certain parts of my life. I don't recognize myself in my life. And I feel like, and I know for me, I felt like I was losing the parts of myself that made me. And for me, I write a lot in my Substack as well as in the book about this notion of parenting adult kid as one element of the transition. But the silence is different. For me, not having all three of my boys here is different. The noise level is different. And then also just the fact that as a parent, as a mom, I spend every day speaking to my kids, hearing from my kids. And there are days where maybe the older boys are not communicating with me as much. And that alone is odd. Not hearing their voice and not smelling their smells or hearing them run down the hallway. And some of these changes are very jarring, I would say.
You note in your book that it's a great time to reinvent, though. So you can start over in a way, right?
You really can. And I think for a lot of us women, and again, in the book, I talk about my own story, but then I was so fortunate to get some stories from amazing women and then expert advice as well. And a lot of what we struggle with in midlife is this idea that there's internal stories about ourselves or parts of our identity that we've been editing for decades, right? Many of us are taught and are modeled to be quiet, to keep the peace, to play small. And also you take that modeling and these kind of patterns of behavior that either we saw or we lived, and you couple it with some of the internal stories we begin to tell ourselves as women. We're not enough. The ability to say no requires a dissertation or an essay, or we exist to make other people comfortable. And it is the reinvention, absolutely. But for me and for a lot of the women that I talk to, it is about reclaiming these parts. Many of these parts have been there, but we've been editing them. So now it's about, hey, I don't have the same pressures. I might have new ones, but I don't have the same pressures. And I'm facing into all these stories that I told myself. How do I want to reclaim myself and my worth in my own life? That's what I write about a lot.
Do you have to do any unlearning in order to get to that point?
Oh, yeah. I think that there's a ton of unlearning there, right? And I think it starts with some of those internal stories that I mentioned were not enough. Saying no is not allowed. Rest, the idea of rest and asking and saying, hey, I am tired. I need help. It's very foreign to a lot of us women. So I think that there is a lot of unlearning. I think some of the other unlearning for me and for a lot of the women that I talk to for the book is this idea that our happiness and our pleasure need to come last on the list, that we don't deserve happiness. We don't deserve pleasure. And asking for those things is like not allowed. So that's a little bit of unlearning for sure. And I think the other unlearning that many of us go through is this idea that in order to make a change, you need to have a perfect plan. Everything needs to be lined up perfectly. And in reality, many of us don't. And what you need is the ability and the desire and the focus to just begin.
The freedom to make a mistake as you're going.
Freedom.
To learn something
absolutely,
new. Right?
Absolutely. And that notion of a mistake is an interesting one because a lot of us, as you're going through these transitions, there's some grief that comes with it, right? There's grief in the fact that maybe your relationship doesn't look like it did when you were in your 20s and 30s. Maybe your career and your job doesn't look like it did. Maybe your relationship with your kids or the activity in your home doesn't look the same. And with that comes shame and embarrassment and also having the ability to look at those changes, not necessarily as failures, but just as changes. That's a subtle difference that I know can change your perspective. And so change in and of itself is not a failure. It's just different.
I know that women have been told for years that they have to be multitaskers. They have to do everything. They've got to have their jobs. They have to have their career to find fulfillment. If they're going to be a parent, they have to be the perfect parent. They have to be there at all the functions and do the fundraisers and be the drivers to all of these places and things like that. And you're right. If a woman says, no, I can't do it, it seems like society says you're being neglectful. But after you turn 50, that's an opportunity for you to take care of yourself.
It really is. And I think, too, a lot of that is the pressure that we're put on with this idea that saying no is not allowed or saying no makes you a neglectful or somehow less than parent or coworker or professional or daughter or whatever it is. The other interesting thing about that, too, is I know for me, and again, I reflect back to the women who not only subscribed to my Substack, but also who shared their stories for the book. Our ability to say no often comes with an essay. If somebody asks me, hey, can you do this thing? I know that I'm much better now, but it takes a lot of effort for me to not go, no, and here are the 17 reasons why. What I always say is, no is a full sentence.
Exactly.
I can just say no.
That's right.
Or I can say, I'm not available. That's 3 words.
And not feel sorry for it.
And not feel sorry and not feel like I'm less than.
Exactly.
And so that small, subtle mantra is so powerful. I don't have to say no with an essay. And I'm not available. 3 simple words, a very short sentence is very empowering.
Are there any other beliefs that women have to overlook or change in order to move on to a better life after turning 50?
Yeah, I think that there are some of them, and a lot of the patterns emerge in the book and through the women I've spoken to. But this idea that you're not enough, that I'm not enough, that me being me, all the good parts of me, all the parts that I love, all the parts that maybe I want to work on or I want to improve, you are enough. And you get to take up space in your own life, putting your desire, putting your happiness, putting your wishes first on the list is allowed, and you don't need permission to do it. That concept, when you say it out loud, of course you don't. It makes no sense that you would, but for so many of us women, that's not how we're conditioned. So those are 2 really big beliefs. I think the other one is this idea that claiming rest is somehow a flaw. So you talked about earlier that a lot of times women are the expectations are piled on. There are days where we look at that and go, we're tired.
Body
I want to
keeps
take
the
a rest.
the body
Yes.
keeps the score. And
It does. And so the idea of saying, I need rest or I need to take care of myself, I need to nurture myself is foreign to a lot of us women because we are so conditioned to give beyond our limits and to give to everyone else. So that's another belief and practice that is super damaging in a lot of ways. But if we can just make small changes is very liberating and releasing.
I know when I turned 50, a little after, I started downsizing. And that's where I found the most liberating, refreshing feeling ever to get rid of all the accumulated garbage in my life.
Stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. In fact, I interviewed somebody not too long ago who said that she was looking around her apartment one day and realized that she was married to a bunch of stuff she really didn't care about. And so she started unloading it. What other kinds of things can be liberating for women in midlife?
I do think that this idea of saying what you need out loud, right? So you have a thought, something comes in, acknowledging what that thought is and giving it a name and then saying it out loud. For some of us women, that notion of saying it out loud, it's like, yep, feel something in me. I acknowledge it, but somehow saying it out loud and then following it up with an action feels wrong. So I think that this idea of you are allowed to take up space in your own life. You don't need permission to do it and to claim the thing you need or want out loud. So again, I come back to, it's one thing to say it in your head and that's great. Saying it out loud and then putting the action behind it is so important. And it doesn't have to start with naming your needs. Doesn't have to be this, like, I'm going to dismantle my whole life. It is really just applying these very simple sentences and saying them out loud. Again, I'm not available. They're 3 words, but I'm saying it out loud. I need a break.
Why?
I disagree.
You've always been helping in the past. Why can't we count on you to do this now?
I'm not available. Or here's what I can do.
That would be a good alternative.
And so it is this idea of that simple practice of saying what you need out loud. It's not a dissertation. It's 3 sentences.
What kinds of hands-on exercises can people go through to prepare them to say no or to start reclaiming their lives after turning 50?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And in the book with this Real Girls Manifesto, which I think is really powerful. And so that full manifesto is in the book, but you can start with one simple thing. Identify something that you're done carrying and identify something that you want to reclaim. Those are 2 things, right? Something that you're done carrying, emotionally carrying, and something that you want to reclaim. And then if you treat those 2 things like a personal contract to yourself. And the idea here is like midlife is not about blowing up your whole life. It just isn't. It's about naming one belief, one habit, or one expectation that you want to let go of, and then something that you want to stand in. And that alone can shift everything.
As part of a reclaiming process, you get to choose what you want to do. And I like your idea that something else has to go if you're going to add this. Because so many people, women especially, they'll just keep adding and adding. And then pretty soon they're spread so thin, nothing really gets their full attention. So to downsize, shed the things that they don't like, that don't give them meaning, joy, or purpose, to embrace something new that they think will, I think that's a very powerful statement.
I think it is. And I think that some of us, and I remember if I go back to my 20s and 30s, that the idea of being in your midlife was somehow a crisis. It was somehow some black box that would swallow us whole and never spit us out. And I really just don't think it's that. I do not view this time as being a crisis. It's clarity. And I also am now able to look back at the hardest parts of my 20s and 30s and 40s. And I've heard from women and also experts say the same thing. When you're able to look back at that time and give yourself the gift of, hey, I was never really falling apart. It felt like it. But hindsight's a little bit 20/20. I was never really falling apart. But I think for me, and again, for so many women that I talk to in the book, we're finally becoming the women that we had been editing for decades. These things aren't crises. And that's not to say that in midlife, we're not faced with hard things. Marriages that are 20, 30, 40 years that are ending. Terminal, devastating, catastrophic health issues. Financial issues. Job changes. Security changes. These things are happening, and they will.
Parents needing care.
Absolutely. And so the transitions, you don't get to turn in your card when you hit a certain magic birthday. But things still happen. But it's having a different mindset and putting ourselves at the center that I think is the change.
How important is rest to having a better mindset?
Look, I go back to my earliest days of motherhood. For those of us who are parent or we had children, that the idea that we were told as mothers is sleep when the baby is sleeping. Okay, that was a joke, right? Because what was I doing when the kids were sleeping? I was showering, like a little bit of self-care. Go figure. I needed to wait until my kid was sleeping to actually get clean or brush my teeth. Or that was my time to do the laundry or the dishes or get caught up on insurance paperwork, or the list gets long. So I never really embraced that idea of rest. But rest is nourishment, right? Rest allows your mind and your spirit and your emotional equilibrium and your body to come back to calm. So it is vital. It's just as vital for women and men who are fitness buffs or who are nutrition buffs or whatever. Like, all those things are important. And equally, or sometimes even more important, is the idea of resting. You have to just quiet everything to nourish. So I think that is a really important aspect. And then coming back to, oh, I can't ask for rest. Rest, yeah, you can. I'm not available. I need help. These are 3 sentences. I'm napping now.
That's right. It's time to take care of yourself, especially when nobody else is really fully reliant upon you for their every need.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We've been telling ourselves stories all our lives, and many times we take this input from well-meaning friends and family members and incorporate it, and it changes us a little bit. But at some point, we have to start rewriting the story that we're telling ourselves, I would think. What do you think about this?
The list of stories is different for each of us. And I write about this in the book a lot, but the stories run deep, right? For me personally, it was this idea that my happiness had to come last, which is wrong, that I was wrong for wanting more, and that I don't deserve more. And these things surfaced in many ways for me at work, in my relationships, in just the way I presented myself to the world. And I am now rewriting those things. I can't say that twice. And I found that connecting with so many women, we often ask ourselves the wrong question when we're presented with opportunities or situations where we're going to be stepping out of a comfort zone. And when we face into something hard, the question that we would ask is, why me? And now that question is different. Now ask myself, why the hell not?
That's right.
So writing a book at 50, my mid-50s, I sat with it. I sat with it for a few months and I was like, I don't know if I could do this. And I don't know. And then I woke up literally one morning in April and I was like, why can't I do this?
Exactly.
And that was a very important shift.
A lot of people, men and women, look at writing a book as like saying, who's going to care what I have to say? And you have a lot of things to say, especially if you've been through tough times. To write about that lets others know that they're not alone and that if you overcame it, they will eventually as well. And maybe you'll make their journey a bit easier.
Absolutely. And I think the way the book is constructed with my own stories, those of other women and experts, it was very validating because these transitions could be very isolating. And I certainly, when I look back at my time in my 30s, I felt like I was the only one struggling because outwardly I'd look at all my friends and go, everybody's got their stuff together. Is it just me? I must be the only one. And then fast forward 2 decades, as I was coming through a lot of these transitions, I had the same thought. Like I'm looking around going, I must be the only one. And the fact is, this book and my Substack and my sharing my story has made me realize I am not crazy. I am not alone. And I don't have to suffer. And this is not a crisis.
That's right. You can get past it.
It's a reclamation. If I look at these things with the right lens, it is not a crisis. It's clarity and it's a reclamation. And I get to do it and I don't need permission.
Do women compete with women after midlife the way men do as well? We grew up competing with our job titles and our positions, responsibilities, salaries, everything else. Does that change for women in midlife? Or are they still competing?
It's interesting. I think that in some ways, of course, there's probably still that competition. But what I'm starting to see now, if you just abstract yourself from my own situation or our own situation, if you look at it, there are so many more women, celebrities, doctors, authorities, influencers who are talking about these transitions. So that number one is level setting, right? Because it makes us each feel like it's not me and I'm not crazy. So that's like a little bit of a neutralizer. I think that when we get to midlife, some of the pressure that we put on ourselves and the standard that we hold ourselves against is slightly changing as well. And I think the third element that is maybe neutralizing things a bit is this idea that I get to decide, right? So take appearance, right? I can be bombarded with women my age or older and images of and language that says, go get this fixed and go get that fixed and buy this serum and buy this supplement and do this and do that. And that's great. However, I get to decide what I do. So
Right.
I can look at another woman and go, hey, I love your skin. Your skin is so great. What do you do? And the answer could be, I've been using sunscreen for 3 decades. I'm too late on that boat. But give me your skincare. What are you using? Because your skin is great. So it's like the pressure, it still exists, of course. We're humans. It's human nature. But I think some of these changes are neutralizing the conversation a bit. And we're coming to this time with this idea that I get to choose.
Right.
I don't have to adhere to another person's standard. I don't have to compete with another woman or a friend or another man in the same way that maybe I felt the pressure to do decades before. And the third element, again, I come back to this idea is I do not need permission to exist the way I want to exist.
Right.
And I owe nobody an explanation.
I know one of the most liberating things for me, and I've heard from others, is that you no longer care what other people think. It's no longer, yeah, you don't like my hairstyle. All right, fine. Just you spend hundreds of dollars getting your hairstyle. I'm going to spend it and do it. I like the way I look right now, and that's fine.
Absolutely. And there's something that's very liberating and freeing about that mindset.
Yep.
And that's not to say, look, not everything is perfect. I still today, after all my writing and all my interviews and all these amazing women who have been so inspirational to me have come into my life, I still find myself, old patterns will immediately kick in, but I can intercept them now. I can short circuit the thought pattern. I can short circuit the action pattern. So it's different. It's not perfect. It's not flawless, but man, it's a lot easier to move through the old muck than it was before.
Is it easier for them to write out a list of things that they are good at and that they are happy with so that they can refer to it when they get into those?
Absolutely. It's like the gratitude journal, right? You write down. And again, what's so powerful about what you just said is substitute the things that you're good at. Substitute the gratitude. Substitute the thing that you want to release and the thing you want to reclaim. Doing that practice of writing it means you're getting it out of your head and you're saying it out loud. So you write it. That's a form of saying it out loud. You actually physically say it out loud. It's that ability to take it out of what is in you and put it into the universe. And for a lot of people, writing, absolutely, it's super powerful. A lot of people, it's just saying the thing.
And writing is something anybody can do. Really.
And believe me, as being somebody in my mid-50s who wrote a book, I am not a trained author. I am not like anybody could do it. And it's certainly humbling. It's very vulnerable. And it's a little anxiety inducing for sure. But you can do it. You don't need a perfect plan. I didn't have one. You don't need a roadmap. You don't need instructions. You don't need permission. You just do it. And that's the other trick. I know for a lot of us women, we live in our heads and we think we have to have everything perfectly lined up. And the reality is just begin.
Right.
Just begin.
And it's overcoming that mental hurdle to begin that first step and to take it, the little teeny tiny step when all the pieces start falling into place because you're moving in that direction. And
absolutely,
people will come into your life, resources will come into your life. You'll learn something. It's amazing what can happen once you get over that fear of taking that first step.
And that element of kind of the law of attraction is so real. And I've seen it play out for me actually in writing the book and writing the Substack. It was the very same thing. And it started more at home, right? Like my friends, we were not talking about these things, but I can tell you the lunches that I have with my girlfriends now than I did 9 months ago are very different. The things we talk about are very different. And the fact that we're making these changes of saying the things out loud, asking the questions because we're not alone. What I've seen happen is the law of attraction. I found the more I started to share, the further I got into writing this book, the more I elicited experts and other women's stories, the more I attracted those people who were willing to share. And so the tenor of the conversations that we're having is so different. And I've seen it play out, which has been so rewarding and super humbling.
I can imagine. Segues into having a support system that before we retire or before midlife, we have a lot of support systems, our family, our bosses, our coworkers, etc., the organizations that we belong to, and our friends group. And that kind of disappears sometimes when you retire. You lose the job connections. You might have to move away and start into a new community where you know nobody or anything like that. So what kind of things can we do to develop or reestablish a support system that will help us through midlife?
I think it's a really good question. And I do want to unpack it a little bit as well, because a lot of these things represent changes, right? Mm-hmm. And for some of us, when these things change, the mindset is automatically that change is bad or change of circumstance is a failure. And with that comes shame and guilt and embarrassment. So I think releasing some of that and just acknowledging that change is just different, and that maybe the playbook that used to work for you doesn't exist, and writing a new playbook is okay. So allow yourself to find the thing that works for you. So if before your network was so closely connected to your job, you have to give yourself the authority and the permission to go, okay, that playbook doesn't exist anymore. So I'm going to write a new one. How do I write a new one? I have hobbies. I'm going to enroll in a club. I'm going to affiliate myself with the things and go to the places that are of interest to me. That's one change. The other change is I might have to lose what no longer serves me.
And there are things that you like to do just naturally. I like to do
just
that.
Naturally.
I like to write. So people say, you need to be in video. And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to get into video. It's just one thing I don't want to get into it. I don't like it. So it's okay to say.
It's okay to say no, and you don't need that essay like we talked about before. But I think it is this idea that, hey, it's okay to not have a perfect playbook. And there's no right answer. There's no right way to do this. That's the other thing that I think is really powerful. And I saw play out with the women that I talked to and also the experts. We get ingrained in this idea that there's a right and a wrong way. There really is. There's no right or wrong way.
It's different, right or wrong.
No, and I can look at my own life as an example and I've got this amazing relationship with a man who lives 8,000 miles, completely different hemisphere. If I were looking at that on paper, there's no way that's going to work. Come on. I'm northern, southern hemisphere, time zones, distance, like this is madness. But if I allowed myself to get locked into that one way or the one definition of what a relationship would look like, I would have missed this amazing opportunity and this amazing future that I'm building.
That's a very good point. One of the common themes in your book is that women have to shrink themselves. What do you mean by that?
I think that, again, if you tie it to a couple of things we talked about, the idea that for a lot of us, we are trained, it's modeled for us, and we're conditioned to be the peacekeepers, to not cause waves, to be peaceful, to be small and quiet and not assertive and not inject our opinions.
Subservient.
Yeah. And so we are conditioned, and that's how we begin then. It's just like anything. When you're conditioned and you somehow get rewarded for that, that becomes your natural way of showing up in your own life, but then showing up in your circles that way. And this idea of shrinking yourself is quiet myself. I diminish my opinions. I don't insert them. I don't say no. I don't claim the things that I want. I don't own the fact that I deserve them. I somehow feel embarrassment or shame. And when all these things add up, the behavior is I'll go inward. I won't be as vocal. I won't be as demanding. I won't be as assertive. And that's how I think it shows up for a lot of us. And just women, I know that
Great.
this stuff happens to men too. But for women, it is uniquely modeled. And I think it shows up in very unique and specific ways for many of us.
You wrote a manifesto about your opinions and things like that. Tell us what's in it. And is that part of the book?
It is. It is part of the book. And it is this idea, the exercise that we talked about a little earlier about things that you could do today. Name something you want to release. Name something you want to reclaim. Treat it like your contract. And I think I would end it on saying this. I don't believe that midlife is about blowing up your entire life.
No.
For some of us, that happens either by chance or by choice or by circumstance. But at its core, it's not about blowing up your entire life. It's about naming the beliefs, the habits, the expectations that we want to let go of or that we want to embrace. And then doing the thing to make them. And that alone, that ability to name these things is a huge shift.
Very good. And so you write about this in your book?
I do.
And you do it with humor.
I do it with lots of humor. It's very raw. It's very vulnerable. For any of your listeners who aren't opposed to the occasional curse word, those are in there too. But it is very real. And that's really the anchor. It's the real girl. As I was going through these transitions, forget at 35, there was nobody talking about. I didn't even know perimenopause was a word. All I knew was postmenopause, and it was called the change back then. That's what women are going through, the change.
And you still didn't talk about it in polite society.
No, you didn't talk about it in polite society. So then you fast forward to now, and I love that there are so many celebrities and doctors and influencers who are talking about these things, but I'm not them. I am literally just a real girl in Morgan Hill, California, trying to figure this stuff out without a book, without a handbook, and just taking all these changes as they come. And that was really the impetus for writing the book. Raw, real, honest, vulnerable.
I think people are attracted to authentic more than they are polished.
It's very authentic and it's very unpolished, but it's honest. And that, to me, I had somebody ask me, so I have boys, right? You write about some sensitive subject. Aren't you embarrassed that your boys might read it? And if they read it, all I could say is you're welcome. It can make you a really empathetic partner or just human later in life. So you're welcome.
They're going to encounter it at some point. You might as well learn from
one way,
them.
shape, or form, right?
Exactly. If you could roll the clock back, is there anything you do differently?
I don't think so, but I do wish that if I were to have gone back, I would have embraced this idea that I was always enough. I would have found comfort and some belief in that I wasn't alone in how I was feeling and the experiences that I was having. And I think maybe I wish I would have been a little bit less silent about them,
Just have been a little bit more assertive early on?
Just a little bit more assertive. And yeah. And I think too, I do wish that for those of us at this age, again, and I have two younger sisters who are in their 30s, so I feel like I'm their crash test dummy in a lot of ways. But I write about things, and their response to me is always, thank you, because now we know what's coming.
Right.
So I wish back then we would have had more conversation.
Yes.
To just know what's coming. And so I feel like the women who are coming up in age now are benefiting so much. And look, in your 30s, you don't want to look at anything and go, oh, midlife. Ooh, I'm way too far ahead for that. I'm nowhere near that. But hopefully a lot of these things that are subtly being discussed are planting seeds, because when you come up on it, it'll be here like a freight train. And being prepared, I think, is always just the best plan.
Men and women often talk themselves out of doing what you're doing, like writing a book and talking to others, thinking that they have to be the experts and know absolutely everything in order to dare go out there. The imposter syndrome can be high in doing those kind of projects. And I think it's important for people to realize that they only have to be a step or two ahead of somebody else to provide real value. Just a warning sign, right? In 2 or 3 years, you're going to start encountering this. This is how you prepare for it. You don't have to explain why it happens or anything about it, but just what happened to you, because nobody can argue with your story, right?
No, they can't. And I think too, even in that, what you said is super powerful. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have all the answers, but even just the ability to share and say out loud, hey, I'm struggling with this thing, or hey, this thing just happened to me.
That's right.
That's pretty powerful.
And that takes
And that's a
guts to be
huge
able to
first
do
step.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Especially when you're thinking you're alone, that the only person who
shoot.
has to deal with this. So if I confess that I'm feeling this or experiencing this, knowing that I'm alone, everybody is going to laugh at me or know my weakness, etc. And
Yes.
that keeps people quiet when if they were to
Yes.
share it, it'd be like, I feel that way too. And somebody else says, oh yeah, I felt that way for years. And pretty soon it just what was keeping you in prison evaporates.
Oh, it's so true. That's so well said.
That's neat. So today is the day that Real Girl's Guide to Midlife launched here in the middle of December.
It is. It launched on Amazon, and you can find it there. You can find all the information about my book just by searching Real Girl's Guide to Midlife on Amazon. We have it in paperback and Kindle. All the information about that. And my blog is available on realgirlsguide.com. I'm on Substack. Please come. I write about 3 articles a week, and it's been such fun writing on Substack. But yes, the art, and I always refer to this book not as just mine, but as ours, because I was so grateful and blessed to have many contributors. So I like to say that our book is available. She's out here in the world, and it would be nothing without the men and the experts who dove right in with me. And I'm just so thankful.
How can people connect with you if they'd like to follow your journey or ask you a question?
Absolutely. So you can find me on realgirlsguidetomidlife.com, which is my Substack. I'm Real Girls Guide 55 on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook by searching Real Girls Guide. I'm on LinkedIn, all the socials. And of course, always come to my website, realgirlsguide.com.
Very good. Thank you so
Yes.
much for sharing your story with us today. I know that a lot of people, they don't know what's coming as they're approaching midlife. And so it'll be nice to have some guided advice that is authentic, real, and raw that people will need to hear. And then maybe it'll springboard them into shedding some of the things that have been holding them back for years so that they can start over in a new and better life.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, Greg.
I really enjoyed my conversation with Angela Burk, the author of Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. What stood out most to me was that Angela's insistence that midlife is not about fixing what is broken. It is about reclaiming what was always yours, including your voice and your desires. You have a right to say no without explanation. After turning 50, Angela stumbled upon a truth she wished someone had told her years earlier. That truth was that she, herself, was always enough and never truly alone. She also realized that change does not mean failure, it simply means acting differently or going in a different direction. By writing her book and sharing her own experiences, Angela is helping women to feel less isolated and more empowered to step into the next chapter of their lives with more clarity instead of fear. If you would like to connect with Angela, you can find her book on Amazon in paperback and Kindle editions. You can also follow her writing at Substack and at realgirlsguide.com, where she shares thoughtful, honest essays several times a week. On social media, Angela can be found at Real Girls Guide 55 on Instagram, Real Girls Guide on Facebook, and you can also find her on LinkedIn. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to finding purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you like the show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.